Okay. Welcome, super secret agent trainees, to WhizGirls Academy. Today we have the phenomenal dear friend of mine, Jennifer Sullivan. She's a master trainer, president of memBrain, and many other things. She's going to share her journey with us, and we're going to find out about her childhood first. So thank you, Jennifer, for being here, and please share your childhood with us.
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, and I grew up on a farm. My dad, like many fathers in Pennsylvania at the time, worked in a steel mill, and my mom was an art teacher. And they had a lot of industry ups and downs over the years. And I think part of the reason that I've always had the work ethic that I do is because we had to make do with what we had. And so I've just, growing up, I really loved technology. When I was in high school, I got a Radio Shack computer, a TRS-80, and I became the editor of my school newspaper, and I was writing movie reviews. And I think, it was kind of unique being on a farm because I was kind of in the middle of nowhere. But I discovered, another connection to the world through technology. So I'm excited to be part of this event because, growing up where I did and before I moved to Los Angeles, I had a different perspective on the world and interested to share my story.
Well, thank you. Okay, so you said a couple of things we want to dive into. So you said that you had a Radio Shack. Tell us about that whole experience.
Yeah. So, growing up, I was born before there were computers, as it's hard to believe, but there were no computers. And when I was in high school, my family got a TRS-80 computer, which actually had a color screen and a printer and everything. And, we had desktop publishing, which as a daughter of an art teacher, I was always really creative and I loved to read and write. And using the computer, I was able to start, kind of taking things that I had in my mind and putting them onto paper. And so, yeah, it was kind of the beginning of the internet, the beginning of desktop publishing. So it was something that I, as I started using it, I kept discovering all of these different things that I could do with it. And it kind of tapped into a creative side of me that, I think maybe isn't as expected when you talk about technology, but I really saw it as an outlet for my writing, for my design skills. And I was also a musician. And so, kind of getting access to music early on and figuring out ways that I could actually create music using the computer was really exciting.
Okay, so we're going to get back to the music. So you said you also did movie reviews. This was still in high school as well?
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, I actually got out of school to go to the movie theater to watch movies and then review them for our school newspaper. So as the editor-in-chief, I kind of gave myself that job, which was great. But I was always a big fan of entertainment, which is kind of part of my job now. So when I look back, I think about all of the things that I was really passionate about with music and entertainment, and even the newspaper and writing, as a lot of the things that now shape the career I have today.
That's awesome. All right, so let's go back for a minute and tell me about your other passions and hobbies as a child, and if you had a dream job.
Yeah, I was into a lot of things. I think like a lot of kids, I tried things and failed at a lot of things. I was in gymnastics. I played clarinet. I played piano. I think, music was always kind of a through line for me. I found that I liked to sing. I liked to perform. I had a piano at home and I used to perform for my family. And I started taking voice and piano when I was probably in fifth grade, something like that. My music teacher kind of heard me singing and was like, wow, you can sing. And I got a scholarship to college, ultimately went into music because I got a scholarship for music. But I was always kind of industrious. I was always working on the farm. I was selling, corn and tomatoes by the roadside. And as the daughter of an art teacher, I was making jewelry to sell at crafts fairs and things like that. So I was always kind of coming up with products to market and sell. So when I think back about, my journey to date, a lot of it has to do with that. And then the performance side, getting up in front of a room full of people, being convincing, also, has a lot to do with what shaped me into who I am today.
Okay, so it sounds like you were a maker, an entrepreneur, a creator, like you did DIY, you sold stuff, you did all kinds of things. So how has that shaped your life today?
Well, I ended up, after I graduated with my degree, my undergrad degree was in music education. I ended up getting a job and studying at Carnegie Mellon when they started the entertainment technology program at the school. And I met a lot of people that were working in robotics and entertainment. And I started to kind of envision a different path. And so my first job, I moved to California thinking I'd be doing voice acting or something in the music space. And my first job was with the company that invented the Happy Meal toys for McDonald's, which I didn't even know was a job. And basically, it was a company that specialized in promotional marketing, which was essentially the idea of getting people to buy things by offering them some chance to win or a free prize. With the Happy Meal toys, it was partnerships with all kinds of entertainment companies, like the movie studios and the TV companies. And ultimately, like that was kind of my first entree into marketing. And I've spent the past 20 years working at the intersection of music and design and technology and entertainment.
Okay, so was that company Equity Marketing?
It was Simon Marketing.
Okay, so that's before Equity.
Yes. But I did spend over 20 years working in the promotion. I'm still working on McDonald's business. I consult for an agency that does the Happy Meal toys for McDonald's now. So that's a lot of fun. And but I've worked for Equity Marketing, who was working on the Burger King Kids Meal toys. I've worked on the promotional games like Monopoly at McDonald's. So a lot of things like that.
So first it was the promotional, it was called Simon, right? Then it was Equity right after that?
No, actually, after Simon Marketing, I was hired by a company. This is my story is kind of crazy. I was hired by a company that did location-based entertainment, which if you think about theme parks like Universal Studios or Disneyland, they would do the attractions at the theme parks. And another job that I didn't know existed. And I was hired to basically head up their entire marketing department because it was a very small company, but they were building attractions like the Sooth Landing at Universal Studios. They also did the digital upgrades to all of the movie theaters. So movie theaters before always had just film projectors, and they were helping to roll out digital projectors for the movie theaters, which was really interesting. It was kind of revolutionary for its time, but it was very expensive for the theater owners to put digital projectors into their theaters. But ultimately, it would give them a lot more information about the people that were coming in to see the movies. They wouldn't actually have to load up the film every time. So it was like digital files being transferred. So I learned a lot about the technology behind film production and distribution. So that was pretty interesting. But that was in between. And then after that, I went to Creata, which was an agency, another promotions agency for McDonald's. My boss from Simon Marketing hunted me down and basically brought me on board. And I was responsible for running youth and family marketing, but then also young adult promotions for McDonald's. So I moved to Chicago for a couple of years. And then I was recruited by Equity Marketing to lead up Burger King's kids meal business and all of their youth and family marketing. So that was tie-ins with like Spider-Man 3 and Transformers movie and the Simpsons movie. And so it was a lot of fun.
And so you moved back to LA.
So I moved back to LA from Chicago. That was when I was living in Chicago, I did some really cool things with Creata. I got to tour with Destiny's Child. So I got to actually record a radio spot for Beyonce to record. A lot of things like that. I worked on Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, the last, kind of the last of the trilogy that went on to be a longer franchise. But it was a pretty interesting promotion with McDonald's. But yeah, I moved back to LA. I missed the sunshine. I couldn't stay away from LA. But that's, I ended up meeting Ken Hertz, the founder of memBrain, the company I'm with now, when I was working on McDonald's business right before Burger King. And we became really good friends. He was Beyonce's attorney at the time. And ultimately, after I left equity marketing, I started working on licensing business. So I started Paul Frank licensing. So the Paul Frank character, famous Julius character, I was always a big fan of art. Again, my mom was an art teacher. I was a designer doing graphic design, pay my bills. And I just always loved the Paul Frank character. And so Ken Hertz introduced me to Paul Frank, and I met with the CEO and ultimately started my own agency where we did the licensing for Paul Frank and a number of other art brands.
That's awesome. So at what point did you learn about STEM?
So I learned about STEM when I joined memBrain. So I joined memBrain over 13 years ago. And actually, I've always kind of known about STEM. I think the first time I heard of STEAM was Will.i.am, who I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. I know you have too. I think that's how we met. But Will was always talking about how he was so passionate about teaching people where he came from about opportunities outside of music or sports, kind of looking at engineering as something that could be cool. And I think I first heard of STEAM education and STEM through him.
Awesome. Well, you're known as a futurist and a marketing pioneer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I think I've always been an early adopter of things. So from the TRS-80 computer to where I am today, I've always been really curious. And even when I've been working with the promotions agencies, I was always the person that was responsible for presenting innovative technologies, new music artists, new, movies that are going to be popular franchises. I'm a fan. So I think at the end of the day, being a futurist is somebody that can maybe, get really excited about possibilities. And in science fiction, they call it the what if. So it's kind of looking at possible futures and what it would take to get to that place.
Okay, so for our super secret agents that don't know what a futurist is, can you explain that to them?
Yeah, a futurist is typically somebody that works in innovation, which is helping companies to look at challenges, look at everything from the what's happening in society, the economy, even the environment, and thinking about what is possible. A lot of the work that I do is in future casting, which is thinking about the future from the perspective of a marketing opportunity perspective. So that's looking at business objectives and goals, and then working backwards to figure out, what the outcome is that we want and the roadmap to get there.
Awesome. And you mentioned being a memBrain for 13 years, and how has that journey been so far?
It's been pretty awesome, I have to say. I work very independently, which I love. I got the opportunity to start my own music magazine, which connects my love of writing and music. Our magazine is called The Storm Report, and that's been my passion project over the past 13 years. We've been able to kind of document the changes that have happened in the music industry over that time. We feature 20 up and coming music artists every month. And it really started because we were working with Hasbro, the toy company, and we were doing a lot of partnerships with them for their toy products. So they were thinking about tying in with different music artists for like Twister or Nerf or any of their other brands. And we would typically be responsible for coming up with the music that would go in the commercials, and sometimes the musicians or actors that they would partner with for their commercials. And so after a few years of kind of pitching certain talents to them, and them not going forward with talent they hadn't heard of before, but then that talent turning into Ariana Grande or Ed Sheeran, they finally came back to us and said, could you create a report or some kind of document that gives us early warning radar for talent? So that's what we did with the Storm Report. But primarily what memBrain focuses on is helping brands to navigate pop culture, helping companies to launch their products either into a new market, into a new category. And so a lot of the work that we do kind of sits in this space it's not traditional advertising or traditional marketing. It's more in the innovation space. So it's solving problems.
Okay. Can you also explain for our super secret agents what marketing is and why it's important?
Well, marketing's a lot of things. I think ultimately marketing is about awareness. It's about driving sales. For a lot of people, marketing is telling a brand story, which is how I like to think about it. It's kind of giving yourself a narrative, and figuring out all different channels in ways to reach people. So if you think about it now, you have social media, you have TV, you have the movie theater, like everywhere you have billboards, you have everywhere you go, there's opportunities to get a message to people. And there's just so much happening that you really have to come up with creative ways to engage people. And so marketing is really all about engaging people and getting them to believe in your brand, and also to take some kind of action. So whether they're going to buy your product, whether they're going to share your story, marketing is, I think we're all marketers now. So I think we all have the tools available to us. Being in a marketing function is kind of like being the voice of the brand.
Okay. So you're a magic maker in marketing and tech. Can you tell us about a time when you used your marketing skills to make something super popular, like a cool tech campaign?
That's a good question. We've, over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of celebrities and talents. I think, the partnership that we put together with will.i.am and Coca-Cola for EcoCycle was really popular and interesting. Basically, EcoCycle, will.i.am came up with the idea that Coke spelled backwards was eco. And so he was like, recycling's not cool enough. And how do we make it cooler? And he essentially put together this idea, and we worked together with him and Coca-Cola to create all kinds of partnerships where we would make products out of plastic and aluminum. So it was like recycling, but it was fashionable, and it was partnerships with companies like Levi's and New Era and Beats. And so I think that was probably one of my most favorite programs that I've worked on, because it brought together brand, it brought together a celebrity, but it also brought together a really great cause.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember that campaign. It was so fun.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of experience in marketing. That's like having a superpower. Can you share a fun thing you learned recently that helped you make marketing even cooler?
Oh, that's it. Well, artificial intelligence, I think, is a really important tool for everything. From a marketing perspective, it's like having a collaborator. So I'm speaking specifically about ChatGPT, but also, I use a lot of design programs now where I might have had to spend a lot of time shooting a commercial or doing something like that. I can actually create so much more just on my own. I have more independence with my vision because of artificial intelligence. So I'd say that's probably something that I'm really excited about right now. I think just in general, I've been talking a lot about persistence as being kind of like the superpower that I've been able to develop over the years, learning from failure, continuing to kind of, be flexible and, take opportunities that might otherwise not have seemed like something that I would necessarily work on. I've worked on everything from, selling hamburgers to selling all kinds of technologies. So, and I'm currently working on a project right now that I just love. That's actually a company in South Korea that I found at the Consumer Electronics Show this year that has a new format for music, which is really exciting. It's called a kit album, and it's very big in the K-pop space. And so I'd say that's probably another area that I'm really interested is kind of the future of formats for music, and helping musicians to make money. So that's a lifelong journey for me.
That's awesome. I know you shared the K-pop stuff with me, and it sounds really exciting. Can you tell our secret agents what K-pop is, just in case they don't know?
Sure. Well, I'm sure they've probably heard of Blackpink and BTS and a lot of the K-pop artists that are very successful. K-pop is really kind of an evolution of pop music coming from Korea, specifically. I just recently helped my client to do an activation at KCON, which is here in Los Angeles. It is the Korean Culture Festival. It was created by CJ Media and Entertainment, which is a big company that produces movies and music artists and all kinds of other things. And they started it 11 years ago. BTS actually performed at KCON. So it's a music festival and it's a conference and convention where fans can go and buy lots of merchandise and things like that. But I think what really defines K-pop is that it's dance music. It is music that you just want to dance to. And, it's all pretty much upbeat music, drawing inspiration from around the world. And yeah, it's pretty cool. There's lots of really interesting things that go along with K-pop, like light sticks, which are super popular. If you're a K-pop fan, you typically will buy a light stick that you bring to concerts with you. Each artist has a different light stick, so it determines what kind of fan you are. So I think there's a lot of what I would call like tribalism that happens in the K-pop world, which I think is not necessarily something we see as much with music artists in the US, where there's fan groups that are really just like clubs, where like you're part of a fan club, but it's like an ultimate fan club, where you want to collect the photo cards, you want to collect the light sticks, the t-shirts, all of the different things. From a marketing perspective, it's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. You mentioned mixing music, art, and tech. That's like making a fantastic recipe. Can you tell us about a time when you mix these things to create something really exciting?
Yeah. Well, we worked just a few years ago. We did a partnership with Annie Leibovitz, who, if you're not familiar with Annie, she's a very famous photographer. She takes photos for Vogue and Vanity Fair and a lot of very famous magazines. And she's famous for working with celebrities, but she also does a lot of work with other types of people. So she did an exhibit. We were able to bring a brand together with her, UBS Bank, to sponsor a global tour of her work in 10 different cities, and it was all around women, and it was all kinds of women's stories. And so we were able to kind of take the art side, which was the photography, and bring it together with these kind of beautiful events, where we would have music and we would have content creation, but then we would also use technology to share it all over the world. And so we did a contest where we had people share their own stories using social media, where it was share your hero. And so people could share a picture of the woman in their life that was, somebody special, why they felt like they deserved to be kind of put into that hero position. And we awarded people the opportunity to go to New York and meet with Annie, which was just, kind of a once in a lifetime type of thing. So I love programs like that, where it's kind of like bringing all of the worlds together. And I'll also plug that we are doing an event in October at UCLA in partnership with it's the School for Theater, Film, and Television, and it's going to be a storm shelter. So we're taking our magazine and we're turning it into a full day event, which will be all about music and entertainment and design and technology.
Oh, fabulous. I'm looking forward to that. I remember the Annie Leibovitz event at UBS. That was pre-COVID. I want to say, I don't remember when, but I remember you telling me about that.
Yes, it was before the pandemic. I think since the pandemic, we've had a lot of opportunity to do more of these types of things, where we're doing, kind of platform-based, web-based types of conferences. We put together a whole program for Intel and ASUS around education technology, which was called Education Explorers. And we brought together a lot of thought leaders thinking about how education hasn't changed in the past, 100 years. We had talked about how, if you look at a operating room, a surgeon in an operating room from the 19th century would probably be able to figure out, would be a little bit lost if you put them into an operating room today. There would be all kinds of computers, there would be all kinds of technologies they wouldn't have any knowledge of. But for teachers, it hasn't changed that much in that time period. So I think what really excites me, my undergraduate degree was in music education. I really like thinking about, opportunities like this where, students can actually get access to people that are leaders in industries and can learn. It's something I didn't have access to, even though we had computers, we didn't have this. So I think this is very exciting.
You mentioned the Asus and Intel. Was that the time where you also worked with Gal Gadot, or was that something else?
So we worked with Gal Gadot the year before actually that was right before the pandemic. So we put together a program with Wonder Woman herself and Asus for their Zen book. We had actually been looking at a male celebrity that I will not name that we were going to tie in with. Our client was very interested, and we were able to convince them to consider Gal Gadot because she was so popular after Wonder Woman. She was just starting to work on Wonder Woman 2, and she just had such a fierce, strong personality. Plus, she was so beautiful. We loved the idea of telling the story about the product, which was a laptop, but it's a beautifully designed laptop with all kinds of really powerful features. So she was just the absolute perfect spokesperson for the brand. And she was on our billboards. She was on our retail displays. We did a beautiful commercial with her that was very magical and kind of showed all of the things that technology can do. So yes, that was a great campaign.
Very cool. Okay. You do graphic design, like you mentioned. That's like being an artist with technology. Can you tell us about a time when you used your art skills to make something really eye-catching?
Oh goodness. Well, I've definitely been what people would say is a presentation master. I love doing keynote presentations and kind of PowerPoint types of presentations. I even used Canva and some other platforms as well. But I started out doing things in Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, and I think I can recall a time when I was working with Vivendi Universal Games, which is a video game company, and I had to come up with all of these ad ideas for Best Buy. And I spent an entire weekend just doing different offers for products for their video games. So it was all kinds of giveaways and things like that. But I think I had to come up with like 25 different designs for ads within like 2 days, including the offers. So it wasn't just the design. I also had to come up with a marketing strategy and, kind of the media strategy as well. So I think that was one of the most challenging things that I've ever done. But I do really love helping brands tell stories through visuals. And a lot of the work that I do too kind of sits in like a creative director role now. So I kind of work together with artists to come up with ideas and have them execute them.
Very cool. You have a very diverse background. Can you explain why it's important to explore different activities and hobbies, especially as you are younger, like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old?
Totally. Well, I think anymore, like you don't have to just be one thing. I think when I was growing up, I was, a lot of times people would say, oh, you have to decide now what you're going to be in the future. And what's been incredible about my journey, I was an opera singer. I kind of left that whole part out, but I was a music teacher and an opera singer. I did graphic design to pay my bills, but I really like doing it. And it's become a real superpower that I have, being able to kind of think differently about, everything. Music, I think, trains you in a lot of different skills. There's math, there's, performance, there's all of these other things that go along with, the regiment that you have to become good at music. So I think that it's really important and the arts are really important. But I think just, being curious is a superpower in this day and age. Everything is changing so fast that I think the more that you are interested in the sports, the teams, the friends that you make, just kind of keeping yourself open to possibility. My favorite quote is dream big and stick to it. It's kind of continuing to have an interest in learning more. So never kind of just giving up and thinking that you have to be one thing. I think that's probably the best advice I could give.
That's a very good point. On that note, actually, when you were 11, what piece of advice did you get that you've kept with you today?
When I was 11, I would say, I think, that's a really good question. I think, I've always been really into books. I think I probably was most inspired by stories of people in stories like Anne of Green Gables and stories like that, where there were precocious girls that were doing things that were outside of what a traditional girl would do. So I'd say it wasn't so much advice, but I think I took a lot of inspiration from the books I read, especially growing up on a farm. I didn't have a lot of people, to talk to. So I got a lot of my inspiration from books and TV. I think, I grew up on cartoons, Gem and the Holograms, and people like that. I kind of looked up to what was a potential future for people that I saw on television. So.
Yeah, Gem and the Holograms. Wow. I was obsessed with that too back in the day.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Gem and the Holograms, go back and watch it. It's great.
The originals, I think, are the best. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. What advice would you give our aspiring secret agent trainees in the audience?
Well, I gave away the dream big and stick to it. I think that's something that's really stayed with me. I think also setting goals for yourself is really important. So, having a list of things that you want to achieve every day. I mean, I sit down and I write a to-do list every day, and I think being able to cross things off of my list every day is something that gives me a lot of, it gives me a feeling of achievement. I think also being true to yourself is really important. So I think a lot of times we see things on TV or on social media that maybe are, making us feel like we should be doing something like somebody else. I think not comparing yourself to other people, I think is another really important part of becoming a professional and, kind of becoming who you want to be when you grow up.
That's great advice. You support the TJ Martell Foundation and you were awarded, I think it was before COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that. How did you get involved with them?
So actually, so Jennifer Lopez's manager's assistant had heard my name on a few calls, and people kept talking about me, I guess. I didn't know that they were talking about me, but she nominated me for a Women of Influence award. So the TJ Martell Foundation is a charitable organization that is in the music industry that supports a lot of children's leukemia and things like that. And it's a pretty big deal. A lot of really incredible people involved in it in the music industry. And so I was asked, together with some amazing other women, to be honored as a woman of influence. And yeah, it was humbling. It was really, it wasn't something I ever expected. And I didn't have any idea that my name was being brought up. And it turned out that a friend of mine was also part of the TJ Martell Foundation, and he was the one that told me about it. But it was pretty cool. Throughout my careers, I've always, I think recognition is something that is, something that I haven't gone out and looked for, but when it comes along, it is very nice.
Yeah, that's amazing. You had the JLo, I guess, assistant of assistants and the connections. That's awesome. So would you imagine when you were like 9, 10, 11, 12, like all the things that you're doing now, did you imagine any of that stuff as a child?
I mean, no, I really didn't. I think there were times when I thought I would be a veterinarian. There were times when I thought I would be a writer. And, for most of my high school years, I thought I'd be a musician and a performer and on Broadway or something like that. So I really didn't even know that what I do existed as a career. It wasn't something. I didn't have access to people that were doing marketing, that were working for corporations, that were involved in the music industry in the way that I am. I do think it's exciting because now there's schools that teach music business and kind of the other facets of the industry. So that's pretty exciting. But yeah, I think probably in the next 20 years there'll be even more industries that didn't exist before. So it's I definitely didn't think that this was a potential career path for me. But when I look back at all of the journeys and all of the things that I've done in my career and the skills that I've learned, they're all part of it.
That's awesome. You've also mentored women in tech and worked a lot with the foundation. Can you tell us about that as well?
Yes. So I've worked with a number of different organizations. I do a lot in women in technology and women in toys, which are really interesting organizations. I've helped curate speakers. I've also presented. I do a whole talk on the power of persistence, which I did last year, which was really great. All about having courage and being prepared for failure and things like that. But I've also worked as a mentor for young people starting out in the industry with women in toys. I work with women that are, in their 20s that are just, maybe early in their careers, and we set up every other week or so. We'll set up calls and we'll talk about things that are going on at work. I do a lot of personal branding work too, which if you think of yourself as a brand, it's kind of how do you talk about yourself? What are your strengths, weaknesses? It's the SWOT analysis, which is a marketing term: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's kind of looking at your life from that lens of how you want people to perceive you, how people perceive you already, your friends, your family, your workmates, your boss. And so yeah, I really do love mentorship. And my undergrad was in music education, so I like teaching. So if I have the opportunity to kind of give people some kind of insight or advice for making their lives better or helping them advance in their careers, I'm always happy to do that.
Yeah, and you're really good at it too. I know that for a fact. That's awesome. What is the most memorable project that you've worked on?
Well, I mean, my favorite project that I've worked on was, I'm sure, Paul Frank launching the Paul Frank brand. That was pretty amazing. I had actually been offered a job at a major movie studio to work on a cartoon that I really loved, but it wasn't as popular as some of the other properties that the movie studio had. And I kind of took a leap of faith and worked on developing this licensing program for Paul Frank, which was, a smaller brand that I just really believed in. And so I think that's a consistent through line for all of the projects that I've worked on that I've really loved. They've been something that maybe somebody else didn't see as being an opportunity that I saw. And I was able to kind of build that into a pretty significant business. They ended up selling their company. So it was very successful and
That's
fun.
awesome. That's awesome. What's the biggest piece of advice you'd give to our super secret agents trainees now that want to go into marketing in the future?
I would say, celebrate your wins. Don't be afraid to talk about things that you've achieved, even if they seem small to you. I know a lot of times we are our harshest critics, and it's hard for us to take credit for things that we've done, but it's really important. I think it's definitely, I keep saying superpower, but it is a superpower to be able to talk about yourself, to know yourself, to have kind of courage to be out there talking about yourself. I think you want to always be looking forward. So, don't be afraid to think about what a potential future could be and figuring out what the steps are to get to that future. It really is, I think, anything is possible. Now technology has made it so that anything is possible. You're only limited by the boundaries of your imagination. So you should definitely continue to pursue things if you're excited about them.
That's a great point. And in general, what advice would you give to our super secret agent trainees?
In general, I would say find other super secret agents. Like, the other thing that's really great about being part of an agency is that you're connected to other people. So I think, understanding each person is different. Each person brings something to the table. Look for other perspectives, have your own vision, but also look for other perspectives and, unite. What's the Avengers say? Assemble.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. You mentioned being a speaker and you've shared a ton of cool ideas. Can you tell us of a time when you spoke to a big group and what they took away from your music and tech insights?
Well, I've talked a lot at music conferences about my own journey as a musician. And when I first moved to California, I was working several jobs and I was singing with an orchestra. I was doing the Verdi Requiem and an orchestra in Tennessee. And I had to drop out of the production because I couldn't afford to do it. And it was really heartbreaking for me because I ended up not singing anymore for over a decade before I even tried to sing again. And I've had kind of an epiphany later in life that I've been working for the past 20 years or so to figure out how to make money for musicians, and that's me. So I think that ultimately that experience of being a musician is something that now when I talk on panels at global conferences and things like that to musicians, I can talk to them about. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a professional musician, that you're going to make money as an artist. You can still perform for yourself first. And then, the business side of it is it is a career and it is a commitment. For me personally, I just really love to sing, and that didn't necessarily have to be my career path. That was just something I like to do. And, I think there's more opportunities now, and I've made it so that I'm able to help people more in the position I'm in now. But also, I think the takeaways that I typically get from artists is that they are, they're not using all the tools available to them. That now more than 20 years ago, they have all of these opportunities to reach audiences. And, I think it's an empowering message to think about like what's possible now versus, where artists were in the past.
Okay, looking into the future is exciting. What can you imagine for girls in STEM down the road? And how can we make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
Well, there's definitely a lot of conversation about diversity. I think that there's a much more focused, there's a much more focused effort around bringing women and girls into the STEM world. And I think, it's also thinking about, gender is something that should never be a barrier for girls and women. I know when I was working on the Annie Leibovitz project, there were we did a little session in San Francisco where we had all of these entrepreneurs, and there were women there that were talking about women's health issues and how they were solving for women's health issues with technology. And it was so exciting because it was kind of like, oh, okay, having women in the room is such an important part of any conversation. I have a friend who worked with a car company who was working on improving seatbelts because seatbelts weren't comfortable for women the way that they were designed. So I think, there's two different things. It's on one hand, I think there's a lot of opportunity to think from a female perspective when it comes to STEM and the possibilities of careers in that field. On the other hand, I think that the career in that field is also just really exciting because that is the future. Everything is kind of being driven by technology. We're becoming cyborgs. We're connected to technology, whether we like it or not. And, it's going to continue to improve our lives and hopefully make them even better. So who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
So true. So how can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Is it Instagram? Is it LinkedIn? Do you have a website?
Yeah, definitely find me on Instagram. My handle is kind of funny. It's Dear Calliope. It's Calliope, Dear Calliope. And Calliope was a steam instrument as well as a Greek muse, and it means beautiful voice. And so I really resonated with that name. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure that my information will be easily available as part of the podcast. And yeah, find
Awesome.
me. I love mentoring. So, I'm also very open. If anybody has questions or wants to reach out with specific introductions or anything like that, I can also help.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so we're going to do key takeaways in a minute, but we're doing the quick 60 seconds. So, favorite toy growing up?
I had an Ewok that was stuffed Ewok from Star Wars. That was my favorite toy.
Wow. I think I remember that. That was the first.
Yeah. I think it was Princess Nala. I think her name was Princess Nala. Yeah. A little stuffed Ewok. I have a picture of me with it. It's probably why I think it's my favorite toy, because I have a picture and I can remember it.
I love it. That's awesome. Favorite video game?
Favorite video game was Pitfall.
And what
Pitfall.
Where did you play that?
It was an Atari game.
Ah, okay. Yes. 2600?
I don't remember which Atari it was. It was like, I guess, original Atari.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned Star Wars, because I usually say it's sci-fi, Star Wars, or Star Trek, but you can choose whatever you want.
I would say I'm both. I believe Star Wars I think Star Trek is more hopeful than Star Wars, but Star Wars is more spiritual than Star Trek. So I would have to say I like them both for different reasons.
Tell us the reasons.
Well, Star Trek is all about kind of exploring the worlds around us. So it's, all different diverse types of people and creatures. And I think that there's more of a hopefulness to it, whereas Star Wars is definitely a battle of the light versus the dark, and kind of also embracing the dark and the light in yourself. So I think they're very different. Both are journeys. One is, I think, more of like internal kind of dark journey and kind of a war, versus Star Trek, which I think is definitely more about like adventure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was looking at that and thinking, those were pure STEM when I was growing up. I mean, Star Trek was like the 60s and Star Wars was probably in the 80s. And I remember standing in line in Westwood Village, like down the street from UCLA, to watch the first Star Wars. And it was insane. And just Princess Leia, I was obsessed with, and all the things like Jedi style. And now, like what they did with Rey and like this new one that I haven't seen yet. Have you seen it?
Which one?
I think it's the one with, is it Ashoka?
Ahsoka. Yes, Ahsoka. I'm watching it. It's still on. It's just started. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So thoughts on that? Should we watch it?
Yes. Ahsoka's really great. It's great to see so many female characters too. It's definitely a female lead, and you get to see the first ever female lightsaber battle, which is pretty all-female lightsaber battle. Pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think they're definitely STEM focused with the females now. That's great. Yes. Any other sci-fi?
Well, I like the X-Files, which was also, there's a whole thing, I guess, I've read about the X-Files, which was a sci-fi show that was on in the 90s. And the one main character, Scully, has actually been cited as having there was a ripple effect of women going into STEM careers because she worked for the FBI and she was investigating aliens and investigating, all these spooky things. And so I think the X-Files is definitely another part of my interest in the sci-fi world.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you pointed that out because that's the Gina Davis Institute pointed that out clearly. And I remember that was a really big deal when they made that research public.
Yes.
That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, what about any other shows that you're currently watching on streamer or TV or anything or you think our secret agents would like?
Let's see. I mean, my nephew's super into Minecraft. I mean, I definitely like a lot of games too. So I think that there's a lot in that space. I typically go back and watch things over and over again. I'm watching Chuck. I don't know if anyone's ever watched Chuck, but it's a fun show. It was on probably about 10 years ago, but it's another one it's kind of a fun one. I don't know. I have a block. I can't think of any other ones. Favorite movie? I would have to say, that's really, really difficult. The Princess Bride, maybe? Or Goonies?
Both good ones.
Yeah, but The Princess Bride, probably.
Yeah, that's really good. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. It's probably on Netflix, or if you Google it, I'm sure it'll come up if you haven't heard of it, because it's from, I think, the 90s, right?
Yeah, I think definitely.
Yeah. Okay, favorite superhero?
My favorite superhero would have to be, this is also a tough one, Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. I think I met with Stan Lee years and years ago. I was working on McDonald's, and we were trying to figure out a story for Ronald McDonald, like the actual clown for McDonald's. And I met with Stan Lee, who was the creator of Spider-Man. And he was coming up with all of the stories about, where Ronald McDonald came from and why he's in, at McDonald Land and all of this stuff. And but I remember him talking about all of the Marvel characters that he created, and they were all humans, whereas like DC was mostly supernatural or like aliens. All of the characters in the Marvel universe were humans with extraordinary abilities. So they'd had something happen to them, and usually it was a tragedy, like something really scary or dark happened to them, and they turn into a superhero. And so I think Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. All of the messaging in Spider-Man, the fact that he's young and kind of fun and he can do all this really cool stuff. I loved all of the new Spider-Verse films too. So if I had to name a favorite animated film, it would probably be one of those.
That's interesting. I think today's officially Spider-Man Day because our guest before you today also said Spider-Man. And I was like, wow, I guess it's officially Spider-Man Day at WhizGirls Academy.
Well, and anybody can, I think they've also made it so that anybody can be Spider-Man. So there's something really exciting and interesting about that.
Yeah, I missed the latest one. I have to see it. But the last one with Robert Downey Jr. was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So now time for key takeaways. And let me know if I missed anything, please. All right. You don't have to just be or do one thing in life. Be curious. Being curious is a superpower. Keep yourself open. Be interested in learning more. Dream big and stick to it. Set goals for yourself. Be true to yourself. Don't compare your life to others. Celebrate your wins. Find other super secret agents. Connect to others. Look for other perspectives.
That's about it. Yeah, be real. Be yourself. I think that's another thing. Yes.
That's a good one to end on. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your journey with us and your time and your expertise and where our super secret agents can look for you online. We're excited to follow your journey moving forward, and we are super, super, super honored to have you today. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time at WhizGirls Academy. See you tomorrow.